Thank you. Thank you very much for coming out at one of our lunches. We do these, as you know, try to do them as often as we can now statewide. I haven't been able to do as many as we did when I was the Western District, but we've done 2 or 3 in this room and some in other places, and I appreciate you all being here. Your Honor, Dan, thank you for coming. Elected officials, thank you all very much for coming. I know I got you here with a personal letter that said, come on out, we'll talk about events in Washington, and then you woke up and picked the paper up and said, aha, he's getting us there under false pretenses. I do want to do what we always do at these. I want to talk to you about events in Washington and then hear from you. I want to make a couple of quick introductions. I think you know everybody, but some of you don't get to see them often enough. First, going in ascending order by age. You ought to stand up so folks can see what you look like if they don't know everybody. This is my daughter Whitney. This is my daughter Erin. This is our son Griff. You said hello to Carol when she came in. Now, okay, give me the bit. Now there's someone you haven't met. This is Griff and Chris Treadway's son. Chris wasn't able to be with us. She's on the job, whereas her husband is loafing out here with me in Montana. And this guy's name is Keelan, Keelan. He checks to be sure I know how to spell it. Keelan is Gaelic, his dad tells me. It means a ball of fire. I picked him up and showed him to some folks over in Helena. He actually crawled over to me, and so I picked him up and showed him to some folks, and then I realized after I held him for a second or two why he had crawled over to me. I could tell by the bottom of his pants that he was... I put him down and said, listen, kid, you're not the first Montanan that's tried to do that on me. But not many, thankfully, not many. Well, let me tell you how we came to this decision, Carol and I. And let me also share with you another piece of information, which is not much news, but it's nice to know it anecdotally, I guess. In the spring of 91, I was in Missoula. The buds were almost ready to come out on the trees. And I had that winter told Montanans that I would tell them of my decision whether or not to run for governor, as many Montanans were asking me to do, or whether I would decide to stay in Congress and run for the statewide seat, because that was the year that we found out that Montana was going to lose one of its members of Congress. I was in Missoula on a spring day in 1991, and I went for a walk, and I got up to the little bridge over here by the Edgewater, the little bridge over the Rattlesnake Creek. That bridge was constructed 5 years before I was born. I noticed from the plaque on it, 1932 it was constructed. And I had been thinking about the decision and frankly vacillating back and forth for 3 or 4 months. But I noticed that the buds were almost out on the trees here in Missoula, and I had to keep my promise to Montanans to tell them of my decision early. I leaned with my elbows and forearms on that bridge, and I looked down at that fast-rushing Rattlesnake Creek. Coming as it was out of the Rattlesnake Wilderness, which you and I protected for generations yet to come. I don't want to get too romantic about this, but you all understand what I'm talking about. Sometimes when you're around the natural running water, like the water, you become clearer. Your thinking becomes clearer. And as I looked down into Rattlesnake Creek that afternoon, I thought to myself, there is a certain flow of Montana history. There is a certain stream of events that require my continued attendance to matters Montana at the federal level, and decided there on that little bridge constructed before I was born, spanning a creek that you and I together have helped to keep pure, that my job was still in Washington, and within a few days I announced that to Montanans. The election came the next year and went, and within weeks, after you honored me by electing me statewide, Carol and I decided that we couldn't bear what was then to us unbearable homesickness much longer, but that in fact, having made the decision to run for the statewide seat, I owed you and the other many hundreds of thousands of Montanans 2 good full terms, if you so choose to leave me in them. And so it was in '92, at the end of '92, that Carol and I made the decision that it would be '96 that we would come home. We didn't make it for certain. In fact, we certified between the two of us and our family, including Chris, Griff's wife, that we certified it among ourselves at Christmas, this Christmas, and decided to tell you in the manner in which we did. I think the timing of it is okay. My leaving is okay. It'll be all right. Everybody's replaceable. I am too. Look, you're all going to die. So am I. Somebody's going to replace all of us, folks. So we're all replaceable. I have no doubt about that. I have, as Harry Truman once said, a deep and abiding trust in the destiny of free people, and all will turn out okay. And the timing of it is all right. I mean, it's all right for both parties. There is 6 months to go before the primary. People in my party and the Republican Party have an ample opportunity to decide whether my decision affects them and in what way. And there's time to put on a good primary, and of course, more than ample time to run through the general election. I have a year to go. The term is only half over. I made one promise to you and other Montanans when I first sought this office. I said, I'll make one promise. That was the first promise I made. It turned out it was the last one, too. I've only made one, and that is, I'll keep my sleeves rolled up. I've tried to do that. I hope you're satisfied that I've at least tried to do it, and I pledge I'll continue to do it for the coming years. One of the reasons we're homesick, I'm going to stop the homesickness stuff on this, but one of the reasons we're homesick is that when you have a life like mine where you come home to Montana all the time, and as I said, the Missoulian reprinted, I can see the fishing holes and I can see the hiking trails. I just can't get out of the car to get at them because I've got business to do and somebody waiting down the road in the at the next meeting. But there's another problem with it, and that is that I see you in meetings like this for the most part, or I see you walking up the steps out here as I did Jack and Maggie Mudd and some others, and I have to say hello and thanks, and I'll see you in a little bit, and I don't see them in a little bit, and I don't get a chance to stop and talk to you and say hello. I see people like Alice, others, and they're my old pals, and yet I come and go, bang. I've gotten, particularly statewide, so I go up and say to people, hello, I'm Pat Williams. I have to leave now. And that's no way to live, frankly. And you can't really renew your friendships that way. You can't keep them alive. And I'm going to do that again today. I've got to be back in Washington. And Carol and I have a flight that leaves a little after 2 o'clock. I'm going to be back, and you and I can visit, including in another one of these at least. But today, we're going to stay as long as we can with your questions. By the way, I know some of you have to get back to work because of 1 o'clock, and so obviously you'll feel free to get up and leave, but find no embarrassment, Matt. I know some of you will have to leave. Carol and I will stay as long as we can, and then, as we've always done, I've got to bust out the door and go do the next thing. And that's not good. That's something we want to stop as well. What am I going to do? I don't know, but I want to be involved in the political life of this state, not as an elected official, but as a common citizen, one of 900,000. Montana is too exciting. The change here is greater than that going on, and more exciting, more vigorous, more fragile, more tenuous, more real than that going on in any other state in the United States. I'm interested in it, and watching it 2,000 miles away isn't for me. I want to get here where I'm at street level, and I can see it at eye level, and I can simply be a citizen like you, trying to direct it from that level, trying to do the little bit I can do as you do, through initiatives and referendum and getting people out to vote and writing letters to the editor and running for office, which you'll do and I won't. So I want to do it that way. I want to see Montana closer up again. And maybe that involves teaching at a college or a university. You never know. There might be a university somewhere that calls me and says, Pat, we have room for one more over in the political science department. I'm checking to see if the personnel manager for the university is here. I may want to write a column if any newspapers that have it, and although I'm more polite than Rush Limbaugh, I may want to do a talk show, and we'll see. Okay, now let me do a quick thing about what's going on in Washington. I'll center it around the budget, and then we'll hear from you, okay? If you have answers, that's what we need. If you have questions, I try to answer them about anything at all. Or if you have any questions of Carol, you know, she's in Peace Links, and the national, international director of Peace Links. They started out with 8 women, and now this Montana kid with her organizability has turned it into a group of 90,000 women around the world, and they're doing a hell of a lot. What's going on in Washington today is the great disagreement and the great national debate occurring in Washington goes by the name of balancing the budget, but there are many different things happening than just trying to balance the budget. There isn't anyone in America, Democrat or Republican, who for years hasn't understood that this country has to move toward a balanced budget. Democrats and Republicans run for president saying we have to move toward a balanced budget. People run for Congress saying we've got to get to a balanced budget. Moving toward it, achieving it, trying to, has never been an issue for many, many years. The question is, how do you do it? Under what policy considerations? And how do you do it? And when you come out the other end, you still have a balanced society and a balanced economy. That's the issue. Now, what is at stake in this? Each one of you get to make up your own mind how you stand on it. What is at stake in this is whether or not certain hallmark federal efforts of the past 50 years, some of them newer than that, but during that time frame, have worked in America, or whether we can dynamite the place, throw it all out, say it didn't work, start over without doing damage to the United States. That's what is going on. I personally think that dynamiting the federal government and starting over would be disastrous for this state and this country, but particularly for this state, which has profited greatly from the state-federal partnership, which is at least half century old. Example, Medicare. When Medicare was originally proposed, there were 2 proposals. One by Republicans to make it voluntary and run by the private sector. The other by the Democrats to make it mandatory, I know that's a bad word today, and run by the public through their federal government. Democrats carried the day. It was not a bipartisan issue. Democrats carried the day after several years of debate, struggle, and we finally created Medicare. Prior to Medicare, 60% of the senior citizens in this country had no health care. They simply bankrupted their sons and daughters or left the hospital and the doctors holding the sack. 60% of American seniors, 35 years ago, no insurance. Today, 1%, less than 1% of American seniors do not have health insurance. And they are no longer placing in poverty to pay their medical bills their sons and daughters and grandsons and granddaughters. I think Medicare has worked and is one of the programs that has helped to build and expand the great middle class in America, which is my definition of a balanced society. The bigger the middle class, I personally believe, the better the balance. We can say the same sorts of things about Social Security. Prior to Social Security, by far most American senior citizens lived in poverty. Today, 10% instead of 70 or 80. 10% of American seniors live in poverty. Expansion of the middle class. The list goes on, from Head Start to guaranteed student loans. Does everything that the federal government has done in the past 50 years work? No, and a lot of it's gone because it didn't work. There is this myth that the government never stops anything. Well, ask your city and county commissioners and your mayor how they like revenue sharing today. It was stopped. It has been ended. And during the Reagan years, the questions were not asked whether it was good or bad. It was simply ended. A lot of programs in America have been ended, usually because they haven't worked well. But there are some federal efforts which, frankly, the far right, the far extreme right wing despise, but which, in my view, must remain in place because they create a balanced society and a balanced economy. Now, having said that, there is no question, and has not been ever since I've been in Washington, that Medicare needs adjustment as the years go by. When Medicare was first created, the law assigned a group of trustees to send an annual report to the Congress of the United States on the condition of Medicare. And that happens almost every year. For a few years, for some reason, I don't know why they missed it, but almost every year, and certainly every year but one since I've been in Congress, we get that report from the trustees. Tells us how many people are in Medicare, what does it cost, what's the cost of Part A and Part B, how many premiums were taken in, and so on. And one of the things we insist they tell us is this: when would Medicare become insolvent if we allow inflation in health care to continue as it is during the year of that report, and the Congress did nothing with regard to the trust fund to try to create solvency in it? When, if we took hands off Medicare, would it go insolvent? Well, last year the report came up, as it has every year, and it told us when Medicare would be insolvent. And every year that I've been there, for 18 years, we've had a report that gave us the year Medicare would be insolvent if we didn't do something to adjust it. This time, the year is 2002. But the Congress has always, for 35 years, made adjustments in Medicare. We've increased the co-payments. We've reduced the share that the hospitals or doctors can receive. We've raised the premiums to senior citizens. We've always made minor incremental adjustments along the way to keep pushing it out. Now, some people say, well, that's only pushing off the inevitable. Well, that's like claiming that some business downtown, if they didn't raise their prices or create new efficiencies, but if inflation came on them, in other words, they had to pay more for the ham coming in the front door, but they didn't charge the back door, but they didn't charge more for the ham sandwiches that people were consuming, right? By the year 2002, those businesses would be broke. So they correct a little bit. They create efficiencies. They do whatever they have to do with regard to benefits or salaries or prices on the menu to be sure that they don't go bankrupt. But here's the point. Do they raise the menu on the salary enough so that they won't go bankrupt in the year 2050? No, they'd have to raise prices too much to do that. So they just make sure that they keep pushing that out, that we meet inflation. And America goes along that way. Now, some people say it's dangerous, others say it isn't. But that's how it has been done all these years, and it continues to work. Adjustments need to be made in Medicare. The trustees tell us we've got to find about $80 billion in savings by the year 2002. If we find a few more dollars than that, then we push it out even farther, and we have to make even fewer adjustments along the way. But the president has recommended somewhere around $100 billion adjustments in Medicare. The Republican plan is to make adjustments in Medicare of $270 billion. And they say, well, you need that much to save it. Not according to the report. You only need $80 billion to save it to 2002. What do they do with the rest of the money? They give it to Donald Trump. They give it to Donald Trump. Now, they deny that. They say, no, that's not what we're doing with it. We say, well, then what are you doing with it? And they can't tell us. They can't tell us. And it isn't just Donald Trump. I mean, here's the deal on the Republican tax cut. Let's take a Montana family, average family. Let's say a family of 3 in Montana, earning the average wage in Montana, $25,000 thereabouts. If you're that family, you will receive $150 under the Gingrich Republican tax cut. Now let's take another Montana family, top 1% wealthiest. Same family, different family, but 3 people. But they never make less than $250,000 a year. They're going to get $20,000 under the Gingrich tax cut. That's not how you expand the middle class. Now, do we resent them getting $20,000 on the tax cut? Well, I don't know that we resent it, but here's the problem. They get the $20,000 on the tax cut, and your grandma and grandpa and families get cut on Medicare, and you have to pick up the difference, and you only got $150 in the deal on your tax cut. See the problem? Republicans say, I don't want to go on too long about this because we've got other things, but the Republicans say this: we're not cutting Medicare. They say we're not cutting it. Well, I can't argue with that logic, because in the year 2002, we're going to spend more on Medicare than we do today. The logic of it, though, is different than that. It's not that simple. Let's say that you have a new nice stadium out at the university, but let's use the example of a town that has a 1,000 seat stadium, but they need a 10,000 seat stadium, and they bond themselves for a 10,000 seat stadium. But then the folks in charge come in and say, we've decided we're not going to build a 10,000 seat stadium, even though we bonded for it. We're only going to build a 2,000 seat stadium. And the citizens of that town say, well, wait a minute. We're 8,000 or 9,000 seats short here. You're cutting 8,000 or 9,000 seats. They say, no, we're not. We're adding 1,000. And you say, yeah, well, okay, then let me put it to you another way. There's 9,000 people who aren't going to get a seat. Now, that's what's going on with Medicare. That's what's going on. There are millions of people that are not going to get a seat at Medicare because we won't have spent enough under the Republican plan, even though we're going to spend more than we do today. We won't have spent enough to take care of all the new seniors coming into the system and inflation. Now, the other thing, finally, the Republicans want to do on Medicare is do what they tried to do 35 years ago when they voted to privatize it and to make it voluntary. Their proposal set aside the cuts, changes Medicare to privatize it and make it voluntary. So that's the Medicare and the tax cut portions that I'll just kind of centerpiece on here because those are the ones that are in the news. But there are thousands of other things in the budget that are a problem. Let me make a prediction to you, and I'm almost always wrong through the years about predictions on what's going to happen legislatively. For example, I've been telling you year in and year out that this Congress we're going to pass a Montana wilderness bill, and I haven't been right yet, unfortunately, which is something I will still try to do before we get out of here and do a good one, but with this crowd in Washington, I got my doubts. There are, as I started to say, there are many other thousands of things in this bill that I don't like, but a prediction. I think the president and the Republicans and the president, the Democrats and the Republicans are going to come to an agreement probably sometime in mid-February on the budget. Now, the president's State of the Union is January 23rd. He required, for whatever reasoning President Clinton had, he required that this agreement now to keep the government running go until 3 days after his State of the Union message, which I think is interesting timing and must have some meaning. But I haven't talked to the president about it, so I don't know what the meaning of it is. It may be that he wants to get up at the State of the Union and with the polls clearly on his side on these issues and say, turn to the Speaker. I guess I'm talking about what Pat Williams would do, not what Bill Clinton might do, but just turn to the Speaker and say, Mr. Speaker, the American people just want to save these things that I've just talked about, toward the end of his speech. And you and I disagree. You don't want to save them. The American people do. I do. I'm determined to save them on their behalf. You know my address, Mr. Speaker. You've been down there a lot. And everybody in America knows my address. And then I'd hand them a piece of paper and I'd say, and Newt, here's my phone number. When you get ready to come around, call me. And if you don't come around, Newt, we'll just let her go till November. And we'll let the American people decide. You won't believe it, but Keelan actually applauded that himself. I think he thought you were all patty caking. He's learned that. Or maybe he's just a Williams and he knows you applaud when you hear something you like. Huh? Well, let me, despite the many, many other very important and critical things that are going on in Washington under the kind of the guise of the budget debate, let me stop there because our time is unfortunately limited, and hear what you have in mind. Sure.
Congressman Williams, I'm Donald Scott. I belong to Veterans for Peace. I understand the United States is going to start testing. We were testing again the 18th of June. They're going to test on into 1997.
No, I don't. I mean, if you've heard that, I have not heard that. Yeah, I'd appreciate having it. I know that the president halted or made a decision to continue the halt, and he did it until a date certain. Now, that didn't mean that that we were going to begin testing again on that date. It meant that we were halted at least until that date, until negotiations with the French and others continued. But I'd appreciate having it because under almost any condition I can think of, I'd oppose a resumption of it. And Carol will be interested in that too. God Peacelink's phones will be going all over the world if that happens.
Pat, there's a mic out here.
Okay, if you'll just put your hand up, Mike will give you a mic. And
Congressman Williams, first off, I like your tie. The hands-on approach. I'm a recently furloughed government employee, and I've been out twice now, and I'm kind of wondering if, is it 3 times and you're out and I need to start looking for another job, or I kind of feel like the pawn that keeps getting knocked off the chess table here. Do you have any ideas on that?
well, as I say, my sense of it is that that there will. I guess I didn't say this and should have been clear. I don't believe there will be another stoppage. I don't think there will be another one. I think that after, if they haven't made a decision what to do by January 23rd, and I don't think they're going to, although they may be closer than we know, then I believe that they will agree to extend the government regardless, and go from there. So I don't think you'll be out again, although with budget cuts, I'm not sure any federal employees are particularly safe either in their job or their benefits. I personally think for us to pick on federal employees continually through the decades is a tragic mistake and is part of the reason for this kind of anti-government cancer in the country. But hopefully you and your counterparts will be protected. Want to wait for the mic?
I really appreciate your love of the outdoors and of wild places. And with the passage of the salvage rider, which has been called the worst piece of environmental legislation ever, and now with the introduction of the salvage repeal legislation by Elizabeth First, it has 81 co-sponsors. And I understand that the political reality is very difficult, but I'm wondering if you can just explain why you aren't willing to sign on to it, because it seems it is a vote in the right direction, and whether it's symbolic or not, it means a great deal to the people and to the public lands, that not that we stop logging on public lands, that's not really the issue, but that we stop abuse of the salvage rider. And if you're interested, I have about 30 examples of abuse plus a map for you.
If you only have 30, you don't have them all, so I'll share some of mine with you. I understand that political symbolism is very important. When I was asked to sign the salvage sale bill by Elizabeth and then by many Montanans, I was involved in trying to protect Montana's wild lands in a way where the rubber would really hit the road, and that is to convince the President and Agriculture Secretary Dan Glickman to make a one-of-a-kind, first-time in history order by executive fiat that simply said, these wild lands in Montana, unroaded and as of yet undetermined and undesignated by Congress, are off limits. And I wanted to get that done. And so the first time I was asked, I had to say to the press, look, I think it's moot. I'm involved in other things. Now that that's out of the way, and when the session starts back up, I'll take a close look at the legislation to be sure it would comport with what I think we ought to do, and at that point, then I'll make a decision about it. But I appreciate your interest and your assistance and help and good work on it, and I know your concern about the symbolism of it being important. Thanks. Mona? See Mona?
I don't have a question. I have an award of merit to Congressman Pat Williams for distinguished service to the people of Montana as representative in the U.S. House of Representatives from January 1979 until his voluntary retirement in 1996. Presented on this 15th day of January 1996 by a bipartisan committee of our household. There's a tad bit more. Signed by Morris C. Payne and Tom Payne. What Britain's historian Macaulay said of one of England's great political statesmen, the Marquis of Halifax, may justly be said of Pat Williams. Through frequent and violent revolutions of public feeling, he almost invariably took that view of the great questions of his time, which history has finally adopted.
And I can verify that both signatures on here indicate and certify that it is a bipartisan agreement. Did you have to talk long, Maura, or did he agree right away? Tom, Maura, thank you both very, very much. I'm really very appreciative of this. Thank you. And I've honored your friendship, having your friendship through the years. Okay, anyone that gets the mic. Is this too awkward? Should we just stand up and shout?
Pat, I'm Doug Wright. I think you know that. I'm representative of federal employees, and as one, I'd like to say thank you for all you've done for us over the years, and for what I know you will do this year, and welcome home.
Thanks. Let's make a pact, Montana. Let's quit beating up on the people that work for us.
This is easy, Pat. Chuck's uncle. Whenever you have a half day, I'll take you out on a trail.
Chuck says he'd take me on a new trail. I'm frankly fearful of Chuck's trails. Those critters know Chuck. I haven't met most of them, you know. So I went up and visited with some of the folks around KUFM before I came down here, and Sally Mock said the most Montana thing to me. At the end of the interview, Sally said, "Pat, I know a few hiking trails I'd be glad to share with you, but you're going to have to find the fishing holes on your own." What else?
Debbie Weinstein. I work for the YWCA, and this is one of the many really good organizations in this community that's really holding up the safety net with almost nothing at all. Your decision not to run again, Pat, is the latest of many progressive senators and representatives who have made this choice not to run. The future is looking gloomy. We've got really critical issues on the horizon. You talked about Medicare and the impact on seniors. We're looking at a very regressive welfare reform bill where daycare and health insurance is not a given for people who are going to have to leave the rolls. We're looking at the elimination of the Earned Income Tax Credit, which was one of Ronald Reagan's babies. That's pretty serious when they're looking at taking one of his babies and getting rid of it. Teen violence is an issue that everyone's talking about, but you know, all the early intervention programs that are working are also looking like they're going to be gone. As I said, the future looks gloomy with people like yourself leaving. Not trying to lay the guilt on, that's not the intent, but can you give us some words about this?
Well, there's a few Neanderthals leaving too, so it's not all bad. I don't mean to diminish the importance of your question. I don't know if I'm in the, I appreciate your suggestion that I'm in the category of people that we'd miss and shouldn't leave, but some of my friends are leaving and the Congress will be diminished because of it. But look, when I got elected to Congress, I took 2 years out of my life and I went door to door. I said I'd knock on every door in Montana, western Montana. I didn't quite get them all, but my friends and I got to 67,000 doors. And you know what I learned most of all? There's a genius on every block. I mean, there's somebody right behind me that can do a better job than I did. And if it wasn't for that, Montana and America wouldn't progress. And so the news isn't bad in this. The news is good. We just don't quite know who it's about yet, or exactly what it is. I will say this, and I want to say this in a partisan way. I was a little resistant to leave this year because I believe that this presidential and congressional election will be the most important that I've witnessed in my lifetime. And so I want to do what I can to be sure that we elect a progressive. I don't know what liberal or conservative means, and I'm not sure I know what progressive means, but I want to elect somebody that is going to worry about working people, and going to worry about kids and seniors and veterans and Native Americans, and worry about an expanded middle class. I don't want to elect somebody that wants to soak the rich. I don't want to elect somebody that wants to engineer a lot of wealth sharing somehow in America. I want to elect somebody who believes that a federal government can get too big and too out of control, but that it has been a very progressive and legitimate partner with state government, particularly this state government, for a half century or more now, and that tradition should continue, and the programs that work need amendment and adjusted, but to be strengthened. They do not need to be eliminated because that's very dangerous to the society, I believe. And so it is going to be absolutely critical. This election is a referendum. And progressives in America are going to have to pay more attention and demonstrate more concern than they have in the past decade or so, or we're going to lose a lot that has worked very well in this country and in this state.
Pat, I think one of the most important things the seniors should be worried about is the Medicare savings accounts proposed by the Republicans. What this would do would encourage wealthy seniors, or healthy seniors, I mean, to probably pull out of Medicare. It looks like they would save money. Now, as Medicare is now, it's just like a community-rated policy in private insurance. Everybody pays the same premium and everyone's covered. What this would do would leave the sickest seniors in Medicare. And from all I can read, it would do more to do away with the Medicare program as we know it than anything else.
Well said. Let me not say it better, but say it another way. You know, I've learned a lot from you and a lot from being in the Montana legislature many years ago, and now the 18 years you've honored, or 17 plus years you've honored me with in the Congress. But one of the things I came to grip with was the necessity of people mandating certain matters in their lives and agreeing to come together in large groups to protect each individual. We mandate as a people that the person coming in their automobile when they get to the red light will stop. And we don't question that in America. It's mandated, and we do it because we understand the necessity of it. Democrats believed when Social Security was first created and when Medicare and Medicaid were created that everyone had to assume a role in funding it. That if it was voluntary, it wouldn't work. Montanans particularly do not like mandates. I don't like them. But I've learned from you and from others that if we are to have a society with definition, we have to have laws, and we have to require certain things of ourselves. Each of us have to require certain things of ourselves. If we allow, for example, welfare reform to be decided simply by any state, then let me give you an example of what will happen to a friend of Carol's and mine. She's known him all their life, so I've known him for 20 years. Friends of ours in Butte used to be next door neighbors to Carol's parents and Carol on Grand Avenue in Butte. The husband of one of the girls that Carol went around with fell off a horse and had a terrible brain and neck injury and is paralyzed probably for the rest of his life. The federal government, through your acquiescence, mandates that he be taken care of and that family be financially protected. And yes, it costs us all a few pennies, but only pennies, to do that for them. But we have, as a society, said that that's good because that balances the economy and it balances the society, and we want to do that. Now, let's say that we take Medicare or Medicaid or welfare reform, Social Security, whatever it is, but in this instance, Medicaid, and we say we're going to let Montana decide whether that person gets cared for, and we're going to let North Dakota decide. Now, let's say that Montana says, no, it's too expensive to keep that fellow on that equipment. It's not life support equipment, but expensive equipment. Too expensive, so he's out. North Dakota says, our citizens like that are in. You know what that family has to do? They have to pick up and move to North Dakota. And what will North Dakota taxpayers do after a while? They'll say, we can't afford it anymore. Everybody's coming here, and America will be in a race to the bottom. You see? And so we have to be careful how we adjust these programs, and particularly when we remove our societal requirements that we all pull together for the good of the individual.
Pat, I'm Bob McGifford. I'm a retired teacher at the University of Montana. In the 30 years that I've lived in Montana, I've seen some pretty bad things happen to our mountains and our water, our land, our air. The greatest catastrophe of all, in my opinion, is about to be perpetrated in the headwaters of the Blackfoot at Lincoln. The Republican administration in Helena appears from all the signs to be in favor of the McDonald Gold Project. I hope that you as a private citizen will join with those of us who think that this is a terrible thing to have happen and try to stop the 7-Up Pete mine.
The reason, of course, that citizens have such difficulty in being heard on these matters, and the government itself has such a difficulty preventing mines that may cause serious jeopardy to the water or the land, is because of the Mining Act. The Mining Act was signed by Ulysses Grant, and his signature is dry now, and we ought to change the act. We are virtually helpless in Washington, D.C., as you know. We're virtually helpless on this mine, or the one near Yellowstone. The Mining Act, we go by the law, and the Mining Act permits these things to continue to go along. President Clinton, when he was in Jackson Hole and celebrated his birthday down there, I was with him, and he was kind enough to invite Griff and I to come to his birthday party, and that was fun. And he flew over the mine, took a close look, and has his own thoughts about it. And I can tell you the president is not terribly enamored with that mine going forward. He recognizes now it's in the study phase, the EISs and all, and the Forest Service is making some decisions, but the president himself is not very enamored with it, and I think eventually may want to move in and see what possible action he could take himself at some time, perhaps, maybe.
I'd like to echo what was just said about the mine, and I think that if you do come back to Montana, it'd be great if you made your voice heard on how you feel about mines and other environmental issues. And I also want to reiterate the concerns that were expressed earlier about the salvage rider. I know that you're concerned about Montana's wild places, and you realize how important public lands are to Montana and Montanans. And the salvage rider basically not only allows logging to go forward without complying with environmental laws, but it also takes our voices away as citizens of Montana. And I think it's really important that you support Elizabeth First's effort to repeal the rider and show us that you care and that you want to support what we support. Because I know that you've received petitions with hundreds of signatures on them opposing the salvage rider, and I just think that's a really important issue for us right now.
Let me say with regard to because I talked about the salvage rider early, or the Elizabeth's bill earlier, let me say this to you in kind of a historical context. Just before, I didn't know it at the time, but just before you honored me by first electing me to Congress, I think history will show that at about that time, the West, at least the Upper Rockies, our portion of the West, began a transition, and we are now fully in it. And the transition was from an extractive society with regard to our natural resources, from an extractive society to a conservation society. If one does not understand that, then one does not understand and policies of this part of the United States.
Sheila's got one here.
I'd like to follow up a bit on your question on mandates. The Republicans have objected a lot to what they call unfunded mandates. It seems to me it's a law that they don't like. It seems now that they're going the other way and they want funded non-mandates in the form of block grants. That's even a step beyond what you were describing, where states make their own. What's the justification for having that kind of block?
Well, perhaps I'm cynical about this. I think the justification of it is it's the first step in getting the federal government out of its partnership with the states. The given justification for it by my Republican friends and some conservative Democrat friends are that the states can best decide. Well, that's a slogan almost without a meaning when it comes to block grants. It's like our friend that's paralyzed. The issue isn't whether the states can best decide, it's that race to the bottom that is the result that is the problem. But I don't disagree for a minute. In fact, I've said it for a long time, and that is that government can get too big and totally central government is not good. I personally hold that as a belief. I like government closest to the people, but that doesn't mean that there is no room for an appropriate federal partnership. There is. And block grants, I just think, are the dynamiting, beginning of the dynamiting of that partnership. Why don't you all kind of pop a hand up while I'm talking so that Mike can get the mic to you right away and we won't have to wait for people to walk back and forth.
Pat, I just want to tell you that I'd be remiss if I didn't thank you for the time that you've been in office and taking, I guess, a time with a lot of groups that didn't have a voice, and you opened the door for many people. You and I've worked for years working on the Indian vote, and you opened the door for people that never thought they had a voice, and now they do. That door will never be closed, so I want to personally thank you on behalf of tribal people across Montana.
I've found, as I told you, there's a genius on every block, so I don't mean to, with this following short comment, to say that that people who live on any one block are necessarily better than people who live on any other, all right? That's not what I mean by these following comments. Native American people have an enormous amount of wisdom and understanding which they share in a calm, shy, but very lucid way if we will but listen. America is not rich enough to shut out the voices of some of its people. All of our people count. We need them all. And the first people here have an enormous understanding of the place and their relationship to it, and we've got to learn from them. This year, more Native Americans will receive advanced college degrees than received college degrees 2 decades ago. Native Americans have turned the corner. It's about time, because there's 200 years of tragedy that we all need to recover. I've been delighted with my friendship with Rhonda and others, and I've profited by it.
Congressman Williams, my name is Jeff Smith. I'm a Montana broadcaster as well as an internet service provider for the Western Montana. I wanted to just voice that I think that I need to ask you to vote against the telecommunications bill as it's been written. I only see bad things for broadcasters, especially the small independent broadcasters with the bill, as well as I don't see that it's going to do anything good for the internet. I think that the government at this point, until they understand it a little bit better, should just take a hands-off position. Thank you.
Okay, you got a deal. I agree with you. I agree with you.
They can't hear the back here. They can't hear in the back.
Here, Sue.
Sheila Callahan from KMSO. Pat, it seems that today Deb Weinstein is correct, and there are many groups that feel beleaguered, probably none more than the Democratic Party in Montana, faced with a Republican majority in Congress and not a little political infighting here on the local level. We have here in Missoula, for instance, the Democratic Party and the New Party. And many members hold dual citizenship, but they do not share a common agenda. What do you think is the future for the Democratic Party in Montana, and what do you think that your resigning will do to make it worse, and what do you think your coming back will do to make it better?
I brought Keelan up to answer that. I'm not that wise, Sheila. I don't know. I've been neglectful, I suppose, in not even fully giving that the kind of consideration that I should have. I think I was blinded by homesickness, and that got most of my thoughts. Look, when I looked down at the rattlesnake that spring day in '91, I realized that not only was there a theme, a Montana theme and a tradition, but that things move on. And they do. Life's got to go on, and nobody's irreplaceable. The Democrats have plenty of time to watch and see, to round up a good field of candidates, get them filed, and run like hell for public office. I mean, since when was there a shortage of Democratic candidates to run for public office? We usually have too damn many, At least guys like me think that. So I think we'll have good candidates, and I think we'll have appropriate representation in the United States Congress after me, and after we're all out of here. I appreciate the reasoning behind what you're asking, but I think things are fine and they'll go well. I don't know if I answered both of your questions there. Did I? What was the? Shout the first one out. Yeah. Oh, just sort of what I have indicated in the press and alluded to in the beginning here. I probably want to teach, probably at a level of higher education. And the reason for that is I don't want to go back and get certified again to teach them. I frankly think a better job of more interest, more exciting, and more demanding would be 6th grade again, but I don't want to go get recertified. So, and as a number of people in this audience can tell you, hell, anybody can teach at the college or university level. That's not true. That's not true. But for some reason, I'm not sorry I said it.